Well, today we're talking about Glint, and I first came across Glint through Suresh during his GPS days, when he first kind of pointed out and said, you got to check these guys out. But I want to kind of go back to kind of the beginning. How did Glint Pay come about? What's the every company has that kind of that legend as to how they were founded. What's the legend of Glint?
Well, it all starts in 2008. For somebody who's disrupting the financial services space, I am definitely not from financial services. I qualified as an architect. I was getting into the whole world of virtual reality when I came out of university. The first time it was cool, back in the 90s. And I set up a company called Visuality. So we were doing visualizations of the Sydney Olympic Stadium before it was built. Or the Queen St. George's Chapel when it burnt down, to help visualize these really complicated vaulted ceilings. And that merged into developing websites and e-commerce sites for people. So as an architect, actually, it turned out that I had the best possible education for this emerging digital ecosystem, because we were building virtual buildings, a virtual product rather than just physical ones. But the training around architecture is really well suited to that. So even some of the terminologies to do with the new digital ecosystem, can be found in architecture as well originally. So, architecture and, a user experience and things like that were all terms that we were very familiar with back in the day. And so there I was, we were developing e-com solutions for high street retailers like JD Sports, or digital marketing solutions for people like All Saints retailers, manufacturers in Europe like Weidmuller, Watches of Switzerland, all that kind of thing. And I'm watching the TV in 2008, like a lot of people were, as the financial crisis was unfolding. And wow, what a shock to see people queuing outside of Northern Rock, worried about whether they're going to get their money back. I mean, I'm from Sunderland, and Newcastle's just around the corner from where I used to live, and it's pretty shocking to see that. You might be used to seeing it on the television in more developing countries, but to see a run on a bank effectively in your own country was a real shock to the system. And I think, like a lot of people, it was the first time that I realised that a bank is not a risk-free deposit of funds. You put your money in the bank, it ceases to be yours. They lend it out to you. They have a liability to give it back to you whenever you need it, but they lend it out. They put it at risk intentionally. You're supposed to get an interest rate in return for that. So, you start to think about that, and you're thinking surely there's got to be a risk-free way of storing my hard-earned money. Why do I have to put it at risk? Seems to be something wrong with that. And at the same time, that starts to take you down the rabbit hole and start to give you thoughts around, well, hang on, why is it that the fiat currencies, these national currencies like the pound, why do they depreciate in ways outside of my control? £1 used to buy me 4 chocolate bars. Now it buys me 1, and it's 2/3 of the size. What is all that about? And you learn about inflation, and you learn that the money does depreciate in ways outside of your control because of central banking policy, the way central banks run money, or have done since 1970, when they came off the gold standard. And you think, okay, so what's gold? Oh, wow, gold. Wow, it's the ultimate store of value, it turns out. It's used by people and trusted by people all over the world, including central banks, as the ultimate store of value, the currency of last resort, so to speak. Okay, maybe that's a solution. Well, it's not a very good medium of exchange. Certainly wasn't back in 2008. I couldn't use it to go and buy that coffee that you're drinking right now. So, but I kind of thought, up until that point, I'd been thinking of ways every day nearly about how can the internet be used to do things differently, do them faster, or do completely new things more efficiently. And I thought there's got to be a way of enabling physical gold stored in a vault in Switzerland, very safe, very secure. I'm talking about the real physical gold here, not paper derivatives or anything like that. There's got to be a way of connecting that into the digital payment system. So that was the beginning of the journey. And there were lots of people that told me I wouldn't be able to do it, or I wouldn't be allowed to do it. But, as an entrepreneur, I'm sure that lots of people that have been on this show will tell you, it's about tenacity and a slight touch of delusion to help, drive you through all of that. And to the point where I developed a prototype that worked. I think the first 2 glasses of champagne bought on Glint were made at the Hollybush pub in Hampstead in London. And then the rest is history. After that, I managed to, with that prototype, attract some fantastic people to the business, build a board of directors. Very proud to have those people working with me now. Some people from the World Gold Council and Goldman Sachs. We raised our first money, enabled us to create a production version of our platform. Because, of course, there were no off-the-shelf platforms. We couldn't go to GPS, Global Processing Services, and ask to use their system because, everywhere in the world, nobody had enabled physical gold to be used as money. So we've had to go through the expense and the time-consuming tasks of building our own multi-currency platform that uniquely enables gold to be used as money.
Absolutely. I mean, that is an incredible, very entrepreneurial in terms of here's the market, here's the problem, here's a solution which fits all of those rooms there. I do think, the financial crisis, I think within fintech is something that a lot of stuff has been born off the back of that, Monzo, Starling, etc. But obviously nothing to the extreme of, do you know what? Let's actually reinvent the way that we actually store that value. Why gold? Why not other precious metals or other commodities?
For thousands of years, gold has been used as money. Okay, and civilizations have come and gone, and yet gold has still retained its purchasing power. It's still retained its role as money. And there's lots of reasons we could go into why that might be. But I think really what we've got to look at is the most important one, is that it can't be corrupted in any way. Anything whose nature is defined by human beings, be it a national currency or even a cryptocurrency, in my view I think it's a fact, is subject to corruption in some way, even if in an unintentional way, that people will feel that they're improving something. It's corrupting the original nature of that type of currency, that form of money. Gold's created when 2 neutron stars collide. It's the only time, it's the only circumstances in the universe where it's created, and we've got it on this planet, and it's kind of evenly distributed, and there's only a finite amount of it, and it's very difficult to mine, and actually the amount that's mined every year only equates to just over 1% or something, which is in line with the population increase. But you can dig it and put it in a hole in the ground, and it'll still be there in 1,000 years. You can drop an atom bomb on top of it. It might get a bit melt and be a bit thin, but it'll still be there. It's immutable. It's never changing, and it's something that therefore we can rely on. Other forms of money have been used. Silver was used for a long time as money, but I think that was simply because to try and deal with gold's difficulty, and that it was it was so valuable that trying to pay for small things was very difficult. And so gold coins became too valuable in a way. So they brought silver in my view, was a way to try and deal with that. But of course, what we've done at Glint has enabled you to buy 1 penny's worth of gold. We've digitized it. And so we don't have to worry about that. So for me, gold's the ultimate form of money. I can go anywhere in the world and people will appreciate that its value. Did I tell you that the shocking truth, big realization that the pound has lost 85% of its purchasing power in my lifetime. 85%. Can you just think about that for a second? It's ridiculous. And yet gold in that same period has increased its purchasing power by over 550%. RAF fighter pilots put gold sovereigns into the inside of their belt in case they get ejected into enemy territory. They don't put cryptocurrencies or pounds or dollars into their belt. They put gold coins into their belt because they know that wherever they are in the world, they'll be able to use that to pay for their escape back to freedom. So, yeah, you don't have to ask me really why gold is the ultimate form of money. I think most people would know that.
I'm very glad you said that. We actually did the payments race where we had we did a few with gold. We had someone try and get from London to Copenhagen using only gold. Same again from Toronto to Las Vegas, and then from Hong Kong to Singapore, only using gold.
Yeah.
The problem that they had was that each they had I think it was an eighth maple leaf.
Yeah.
And it was more like, right, I'm going to give you this, but you got to look after me for the whole day, as opposed to I'll give you this for kind of like, they couldn't create a chip or anything similar to that.
No, impossible to use it. Impossible to use it as a medium of exchange today. And that's one of the big problems that we've solved, of course. So I literally bought this juice before I came online, and I just used my card and my Glint Mastercard and paid with it. I pay for everything in gold. I'm just on the gold. I've got my own personal gold standard, and that's what we're enabling for everybody, really, to give them that opportunity. Really, there's a lot of inequalities caused by the way the monetary system works. When money is printed by governments and their central banks, it isn't distributed evenly. It gets given to the banks to distribute it. And I think anybody who knows, who've tried to apply for a bank loan would know that, generally speaking, the banks only give money to people who don't need it. If you actually need to borrow some money, you're not going to get it. And so that money goes to the wealthy. It doesn't go to everybody else. And the idea is that there's some kind of trickle-down effect. That the wealthy guy, the wealthy banker who gets paid his bonus and then goes and buys his own apartment, that somehow that will trickle down to the rest of the population. The problem is it takes so long that by the time it has trickled down, that money's worth less. That's the problem with it that we've got. And so Glint enables all of you to be able to buy the tiniest amount of gold, to be able to save it or spend it. Or, I don't have anything wrong with anybody. There's nothing wrong with anybody working hard and acquiring wealth. And even, they should certainly be able to store their wealth properly as well without the purchasing power of that decreasing. So it's what our vision is a world where everyone has an equal opportunity to prosper. And we think that our mission is the first step in that journey is to deliver a reliable gold currency to the world.
Excellent. So let's go into the app. So obviously you got the Glint app.
Yeah.
And you go and have the card. You can go and pay there. Is it in real time in terms of when it would make that transaction from gold to pound sterling?
Yeah. So this is just an easy green juice that I bought at Whole Foods earlier on, just before I came on here, and they were charging £7.78 for that in the shop, and in real time. We pay. Basically, what Glint does is it checks what the latest price of gold is in terms of pounds or the currency of the merchant, works out how much gold, sees how much gold I've got, and decides whether I've got enough to pay for this transaction. We then authorize that transaction with the merchant, so Whole Food let me walk out the shop with this, and at the same time as that transaction goes through, we sell just enough gold. For the proceeds of which go through Mastercard to pay that merchant. So in this situation, it costs 0.1749 grams of gold to buy the juice. I've used it to buy those tickets from Toronto to London, or from London to Japan. I've used it at 35,000 feet. I've used it to buy my juice, and I've used it to buy my Christmas presents. And gold, through this crisis, is doing what it's supposed to do. It's maintaining its purchasing power. So we can see that the price of gold is going up. it started off at $11.50 a year ago. It's now at $1,400 in pounds. But really, I think we've got to start looking at we've got to start changing how we look at things. Gold hasn't changed. Gold hasn't suddenly got some new qualities that it didn't have a year ago. There's a phrase, the golden constant. Gold is never changing, as we discussed before. So gold is the constant, and it's instead of the price of gold going up and down and generally up, what you have to look at is the fact that it's the confidence in fiat currencies that is going up and generally down. By the way, my compliance officer would be very upset with me if I didn't highlight the fact that gold price can go up, of course, does go up, but of course it can go down as well. It does go down at times. So a little warning there for people who might need, if you need your money tomorrow and you're paying in a foreign currency, in this case, if I'm on a gold standard, I'm paying in pounds, then, I've got to make sure that I've got enough gold to cover those transactions. But as I said, in the medium to long term, we're living on a gold standard definitely pays returns. I mean, I've had clients text me and say, listen, this Glint's amazing. I've bought gold at the beginning of the year. I continue to buy gold every month. And I've been spending it, though. I've been spending more of it than I'm accumulating. And yet the value of my gold is worth more than it was a year ago. And that's really where we should be at. We should be at a place, as everything falls apart around us, we want to have something we can hold on to. And gold and Glint's technology gives us that reliability.
Just to go back to the transactions, because I kind of have in my head that there's this vault in Switzerland, and you go and buy, say, what's it, 0.1 grams worth. Little person goes in there, chips off some of your gold there, takes that out and exchanges it. I'm assuming this is happening digitally, and is it happening for every transaction, or is this happening kind of in batches?
So all of the gold that a client buys, what they're doing is they're buying a share of a real physical gold bar that is sat in the vault in Switzerland. Okay, so it is already there. And if you buy more gold than that bar, there's other bars of gold from our liquidity providers just sat over to the right. It's in one of those big vaults with those giant big doors in Zurich. It's under the airport, actually. Okay, so that gold bar already exists.
What's the code to get in?
Even I don't know that. So then when someone buys some gold, effectively what we're doing is we're allowing them to have a greater ownership of that gold bar. We're not the liquidity providers, we're not market making, so there's no risk to us on that. But the customer effectively is buying a piece of that gold bar. And when when all that gold bar is filled up with all of our clients who are buying that gold, it moves over to the left-hand shelf, and a new gold bar is put in place, and our customers are buying into that gold bar. And the same happens in reverse. When somebody wants to buy or sell their gold, what our platform is doing is enabling them to either buy or sell that from other Glint clients, or when that's not possible, offsetting that to our liquidity providers. So yeah, it's always backed by physical gold, which I think is something people need to think about as well, because there's a lot of instances where people think they're buying gold, but really all they're doing is they're exposing themselves to the price of gold. So there's no company or token or fund that exists between you and your ownership of gold.
So I get this core, this absolute principle that you own the gold, and that when you do any transaction, it goes from that. Looking back towards the front end, obviously there's a lot of competition out there, ranging from Mondo Starling all the way through to even the likes of Viola Black out there at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of the elements that you've been looking at as an architect on the front end that you think this is how I make sure that everyone is aware of the advantages of being gold at the back end? How do they filter together?
So we've spent the first few years just focusing on the real fundamentals, which is, can you actually buy, save, spend, and send and receive gold bullion? That's the number one thing. That's being the big hurdle. And the unique selling point and the first mover advantage that we've got. We're only now just turning our heads to the user experience and what can we do to improve that. Obviously, some of those neobanks, that was their USP, is that they enabled a better user experience than the incumbent banks. But I think that advantage has gone now, or rapidly going, as the banks kind of catch up with those neobanks. We've got our fundamental shift, 0 to 1, fintech solution in place, and now we can start to put some of those things in place. So we've only just started enabling, automated or event-based communications coming through on the app through push messaging and in emails. We've only just got statements coming soon in the next, downloadable statements coming soon in the next week or two. We just launched peer-to-peer, by the way, which a few weeks ago, which was a great addition to the platform, so people can now buy and send and receive gold. But I think in some of those things that the neobanks have created, like the ability to have multiple wallets and be able to save into different wallets and give them names to help you organize all of that, enabling pension wrappers, transaction alerts, all of that kind of stuff. For me, is the easy stuff. I mean, I'm going to enjoy doing those things this year. They definitely will lead to greater engagement within the app and better usage. So yeah, look forward really to working on all of that stuff.
Absolutely. Well, one of the things that I find incredible about the banking industry 10 years ago compared to today is, I know I always say this, but 10 years ago, banks like to have everything behind high walls in their own server room, know who has the keys to the server room. Now it's about the ecosystem, it's about the partnerships, it's about going, do you know what, we're not going to throw a huge amount of money, time to build a data center, we're actually going to partner with someone that all they do is do that. Where does Glint sit within this ecosystem in terms of partnering and in terms of, again, forming part of that marketplace?
Yeah, I mean, it's an exciting new world, isn't it? The world of open banking and the APIs that are now a regulatory requirement for businesses like us to have. I think that it's a bit like, when you have a new child, you have all kinds of ideas when that child's born. We just had a new baby girl actually born during lockdown. And you have all kinds of ideas about what that child's going to be like. I've got 2 older children I'm lucky to have. And they've grown into young men who completely surprise me about who they are, what they are. They have their own characters, of course. You have, doesn't matter what your ideas are. You're going to get surprised. And I think the important thing is to be open to those new ideas as they come along, those new opportunities. So obviously, we are the first company in the world to enable physical gold to be used as money in real-time electronic payments at the point of sale. So there will be, no doubt, lots of opportunities for us to partner with other incumbent and neobanks out there and bring in all kinds of new ideas to the fold. And for me, it's just a case of keeping your mind open and keeping fresh. I mean, I think that what we've all got to keep remembering is that we've got to go back to that initial spark that started the company. Whichever kind of startup or fintech you are, you've got to keep that spark alive. And we're still very small, of course, but I'm very conscious that as we grow, we've got to think about how we do that. Maybe we pin it on the wall, something that reminds us about what that spark is, because we've got to stay curious, we've got to stay fresh, we've got to stay imaginative, we've got to be open to new ideas all the time.
Absolutely. Well, the last thing I want to ask, I always ask this to any of these kind of profiles that we do. So Klarna has got Snoop Dogg as their face. Atom Bank has got will.i.am on their creative board. If Glint was to have any pop culture icon, either real, fictional, living or dead, who do you think would best be a good brand ambassador to Glint with no restrictions whatsoever?
Well, I think that we've got to look at people whose ideas have lasted. Have stood the test of time, because, as gold does. So we've got to look to people who have had great ideas, because great ideas never fade. And I think for me, that would have to be Henry Ford. Henry Ford, at the time, if you'd asked people what they wanted, they would have said, can we have a faster horse? Of course, he delivered them the automobile. It met all of their needs and delivered more, of course, and that was true innovation, thinking out of the box. And that idea of the automobile, of course, still has lasted to today. So yeah, Henry Ford will do for us, but might have difficulty bringing him back from the dead. And maybe a hologram will do.
Brilliant, excellent. Well, Jason, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today. Where's the best place to find out more about yourself in Glint?
Yeah, you can go to the App Store, your favorite App Store, and just type in Glint Pay, or you can go to our website, www.glintpay.com. So download the app, it's free, and try it out. See what you think yourself.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.